Hey y'all, I'm Atticus, a bookseller at Literati Bookstore and the host for tonight's event. This evening, we are pleased to welcome Jennifer Sperry Steinorth and A. Van Jordan to our At Home with Literati series in support of Her Read, a graphic poem. For our attendees, the chat is closed, but I'll be dropping links to purchase Her Read throughout the event. You can also use the Q&A feature to submit your questions at any time. This is a reminder that you can shop for more books in-store or at literatibookstore.com for curbside pickup and shipping to your home anywhere in the United States. And now let me introduce tonight's author and moderator. Jennifer Sperry Steinorth's books, plural, include Her Read, a graphic poem, 2021, and Awake with Nine Shades, 2019, excuse me. A finalist for the Forward Review's Prize for Poetry, both from Texas Review Press. A poet, educator, interdisciplinary artist, and licensed builder, she has received grants from the Vermont Studio Center, the Sewanee Writers Conference, Community of Writers, and the MFA for Writers at the Warren Wilson College. Her work has recently appeared in Black Warrior Review, Cincinnati Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, Missouri Review, Plume, Rhino, Tri-Quarterly, and elsewhere. She is a lecturer at the University of Michigan and splits her time between Ann Arbor and Traverse City. A. Van Jordan is the author of 4 collections: Rise, which won the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award, MACNOLIA 2005, which was listed as one of the best books of 2005 by the London Times, Quantum Lyrics 2007, and The Cineast, pardon my butchering. These, W.W. Norton and Co. Jordan has been awarded the Whiting Writers Award, the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, and the Pushcart Fellowship, or the Pushcart Prize. He is also the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a United States Artist Fellowship, and Lehman Literary Award in Poetry. He has taught at a number of institutions, including the University of Northern Carolina in Greensboro, the University of Texas at Austin, Rutgers University, Newark, where he served as the Henry Rutgers Presidential Professor, and at the University of Michigan, where he currently serves as the Robert Hayden Collegiate Professor of English Language and Literature. He is also serving this year as the Moore Visiting Poet at Stanford University. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jennifer and Ben.
Thanks, Atticus. Thanks for getting us started here. Jen.
Hey, Van.
So good to see you again. We've talked a lot about this book, but I want to allow us some time to talk about it in public and let others hear about it and see it. But I'm going to let you set the tone here. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with, are we going to start with Dear Robert, or are we going to start with?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Let's do that. All
right. So thanks, Van. And thank you, Atticus. And I'm so pleased to be here and really happy to have this out loud conversation with you, Van.
Yeah.
I thought I'd read just a little smidgen from Awake with Nine Shades. And I'll share why I'm doing that in just a minute, but I'll read this first poem without a lot of intro. Dear Robert, Robert Frost is hard for me to get excited about. Sacrilege, you say? But I need him now. In order to write, don't know what, not sure how, he loved him, my father-in-law, Robert Frost. The world he wrote about, educated on sight, with a drill bit and know-how, I need him now, my father-in-law. To tell me how to tell my husband I need him now. To hold the world we've lost about, the loss we love about, I write it down, nothing. Nothing Robert Frost about it. Nothing even, odd love, nothing platonic, something catatonic. Maple saplings aren't even. 3 leaves tall. Leavings, 3 leaves tall, all about the base of the tree, not even saplings yet. Not even saplings, yet leafing out. I pull one out of the lichen. I loved him, my father-in-law. I loved him fatly. I loved his portly wobble through the forest. Gone now. Why, I kite about it. A string, a white line between hand and flying thing, a white line spooling out of a hand at the raised end of a body beached. A raised body reclining. A friend I know barely dressed on this beach has lost her father. I take a lover, Rob Frost. Sacrilege, you say? He took his own life. My husband's father. My husband's wife is afraid of what? The drill bit, a robber, the frost, what we winter over all summer, the hammer and 10-penny nails, what is written, what it costs. So many of the poems in Awake with Nine Shades meditate on and sort of turn over this violent death of my father-in-law. And this poem I think of as really interrogating fear of inheritance, inheritance that's familial and personal. But I wanted to read it because it opened the door to a sequence that is interrogating another kind of inheritance. When I first became aware of living writers, I was at Interlochen Center for the Arts in high school, and the faculty there was predominantly male. Much of their work engaged with sort of wilderness endeavors, fishing and hunting, and I say much, I know their work is much broader than that, but as a young woman, that stood out to me. And also many of the male writers that were loomed large, Jim Harrison, Robert Bly, those amazing writers, I kind of put in the same camp as Robert Frost, in that there's sort of these like iconic male figures, and reading their work, I found that I didn't see myself and felt rather othered. And so a way that I began to think about playing with that, interrogating that, is through love letters that might, that's another way that artists, that women enter the story of writers and of visual artists, is in the role of the lover. And so I thought I would interrogate that. And so Van's actually agreed to read a little bit of a longer epistolary sequence just to get a taste of this. What do you think? You ready, Van?
I'm down. Let's do it.
All right. A triste little tryst with R. Frost. Select Billy Dew. Dear Mr. Frost, I hope this finds you well in your little well, or is it more like a mine? I wonder if you've time to speak with me about poetry and accessibility. I'm a midlife poet flirting with crisis, more or less. Genevieve S.
Dear Genevieve S., I've nothing but time. Do you cook? Robert F.
Dear Robert, last night was lovely, lovely, but I don't love your poems. Theirs is an old romance, besotted with, or maybe they're just hard for me. Also, I'm married, please advise. G.
My dear Jen, yes, it was. That's fine. Sure they are. So am I. R.F.
Dear Robert, last night's snow gathering in the window screens, your hands. How easily you slip away. The living leave tracks in the snow. You left your glasses. G.
Dear Guinevere, do you mind if I call you Guinevere? We could role play the highwayman. Wait for me by moonlight, I'll come to thee by moonlight. I do a good dead guy. So can you. F.
Dear Robert, I think of you constantly. Do you think of me? Make X for yes. Make O for yes. GSS.
My dear, I am very sorry. When we meet, I think only of your body of work. Mine is all I have left. Everyone here is dead. There are no chairs, no ankles, no vacant dresses. To embrace the living dead is not living. To embrace the dead living is yet living. Earn your living. Earn your debts. Yours, F.
Dear Robert, I have never carried a milk bucket. I love my husband, but he doesn't love poetry, not even a little. When you look in my eyes, do you see a woman or a poem? What does the woman want? A poem? I can only be seen when my household is asleep. Also, he doesn't dance. Fuck Billy Elliot and Tom Elliot. Fuck Billy Yates and Billy Collins, and fuck you too, so goddamn accessible no one can get close to you. In your lifetime, were you known, Jen SS?
Yeah, I love that. And I love that section of it too. Just it kind of plays with his voice, but also pushes against his voice. And it feels of his time and also sort of our time at the same time.
Oh,
So it's wonderful. So I'm thinking about this and thinking about how you got from that to her read. And initially, we've talked about this, but we're going to pretend like we haven't talked about this at all. And so initially, when I was thinking about this, I was uh, sort of moving in this kind of linear way through the book. But just hearing you read that and talk about the impetus behind it, I wanted to sort of jump to the end of her read. I had there's a moment at the very end where there's a quote that I just love, because much like that Dear Robber, the first poem, um, we use kite as a verb,
mm,
and this you use art as a
mm,
verb, and you say we art to transmute pain. And that kind of brings me back to, it does bring me to the beginning with the epigraph from Elaine Scarry, and so I'm just going to read the epigraph quickly here, if I can locate it. In turn, to place sentience and authority together, to make sentience authoritative, is to place pain and power on the same side of the weapon, and so restructure the object itself. Elaine Scarry, The Body in Pain. And in The Body in Pain, she also talks about this kind of inexpressible way of trying to communicate to others what's going on inside of one's own body. And that also seems to be um, a bit sort of tantamount to trying to express um, not just the body's pain, but one's experience in the world to the other,
yeah.
having others understand what it's like to be in the world in your body. So I just wanted to know if you could talk a bit about that, because it seems like those two texts, um, the Robert Frost, Dear Robber, and then sort of moving to her read, they're kind of in conversation and around this topic of the body in pain, and also just sort of communicating what it's like to be in the world in one's body and that experiential knowledge of the body.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I was thinking about, as I came to think about her read, which is an erasure, right, of an existing text. It's an erasure of the meaning of art by Herbert Reed, and in that text, it is a survey of art from prehistory to the modern era. It's the male critic looking at predominantly, almost entirely male bodies of work. Only one female artist is mentioned in the entire survey, and she doesn't appear until the third edition, which comes out 20 years later. So the first edition comes out in 1931, the second edition, or third edition comes out in 1951, which is the edition that I was working with. And so I think of this like double erasure. Not only are women artists not appearing in the text, but women's bodies are appearing in the text. So women aren't able to tell then their own stories. And of course, this isn't unique to visual art. It's in literature. It's all of history. And so I think there's and modeling is painful from what I understand. I have not done modeling, but
I hadn't thought about it until I read your book. And I realized, oh, I guess that would be hard to hold those poses.
Yeah. I was a dancer, so I do know about having a body on stage and before a mirror and you know, just being a person in the world. You know, there's that sense of looked at. So and I was grappling with physical pain also in the course of writing this book. So you know, pain just kept coming up. And it seemed like this, I love this idea of that Elaine Scarry brings up of creative work as a remedy, a kind of remedy for pain. That's a very crude way to put her argument is much bigger than that. I've been reading that book recursively for like 5 years, and I can't do it justice. But I definitely think that for me, art making is a kind of processing through the body and translating what sometimes comes first in movement that feels very physical in the body, and then trying to find language or image to translate. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, the idea that the body, you know, we think of the body often ideally in good health, and we don't, or we don't think about the body at all, which is also thinking of the body in good health, and we are made more conscious of the body when there's something that's either we're in pain, or something, you know, goes awry in the body health wise, or if someone looking at us says something and makes us conscious of our body, you know, and you know, all of that also goes into our experience in the world, you know, which is you know, a good deal of what I think you're dealing with here. I know we talked about the idea of the origin story, about how people talk about particularly women, and the way they've often been sort of both defined and objectified through the male gaze. And so this book, I think at some point you mentioned that there's only one female pronoun in the entire original text.
Yeah, one she. Yeah.
One she, and that's talking about Barbara Hepworth, right? And so, and I have to say, I didn't know anything about Herbert Reed until I read her read, you know. I said, and so, you know, finding out that he's, you know, he had opinions about everything, you know, all kinds of art, poetry. He was a poet himself, knighted, and I mean, he was clearly a man of a certain age in that way, and kind of a man's man of that age, and sort of, you know, in a way that we don't necessarily, we can look at now and see, interrogate that and see what's problematic with it, but there are also glimpses of him sort of transcending that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was an anarchist. He has a book called To Hell with Culture. He was a real advocate for art in the schools. He was an advocate for Barbara Hepworth and the Surrealists. I mean, he, in some ways, some of his ideas were very progressive
Yeah.
for his time.
Mhm.
But he's kind of a stand-in too. You know, I'm not specifically picking a fight with Herbert Reed in a particular. His book is one of, like, you know, this is not only a problem of, you know, up until that point either, you know. There's a reason why museums are like, oh, now we're like, here's this section over here with some
Mhm.
women artists, and
Yeah.
we discovered this woman artist that was lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing that I thought about reading this book was, just how, being in this, black male body, how much I related to the way in which you talked about, um, uh, sort of being defined by others, and also the ways in which, um, as an individual, you become invisible because you're sort of, you're sort of, melded into a monolith, this kind of monolithic idea of woman,
Yeah.
and so, in the book, in this beautiful, and you have to read some of this. You have to show folks these pages, where the text and the art and the erasure and all that come together and intersect on the page. But what I'm fascinated with is the way in which you're taking this old text and thinking about it through the 21st century lens, and also finding that language, sort of getting language out of the way so we can see this other language that's kind of, as uh, Eleanor Wilner so brilliantly laid out in the introduction, works almost like a palimpsest of what's happening underneath it all.
Mhm.
So, did you want to read some of that? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'll share my screen. So I put together sort of an assemblage that begins roughly at the beginning and ends roughly at the end. And I'm not going to pause in the middle. I'm just going to, it's all kind of sort of seamless-ish, as seamless as the erasure is, which is sometimes very much not seamless. It's
Beautiful. Yeah.
choppy, and I will say in this passage I'm going to read, screen share, trying to talk and do technology at the same time.
There
Oops.
you go.
Okay. In this passage, I'm going to read, the Virgin comes up a bit, as she does in art in the Western canon. And Frankenstein also shows up. And I was thinking about Mary, Mother of Christ, and Mary, Mother of this novel, this monstrous novel. And the novel Frankenstein as being kind of her child. So that's, I think that's all that I need to tell you. I'm just going to read. I won't read everything that's on every page. Sometimes I'm skipping for time and for seamlessness. This is from the preface. Face this book as a road or passage from what is. I hope, for the sake of completeness, with the listener in the present, I make for clarity and resurrect Francesca. Note, I wish to thank Mr. Reed for very kindly lent pains, and on the left are all of the artists who have visual reproductions that appear in the text, with the single woman that appears, Barbara Hepworth, there in the middle. The imp is, properly speaking, what is common to all the arts, is the best starting point of our inquiry. Only the free create the imp. Any man responds to a pleasurable discomfort. The opposite of I is equally rare. I have already a theory of imp beauty native to my own fluctuating phenomenon, manifest in the course of history, uncertain and often baffling his own sense of beauty, to admit the realm of other. Is negation of at the bottom of acute pain? We look often imply absurd. I derive from a flood. I rose in ancient Greece and was the offspring of a particular Apollo or Aphrodite, perfectly formed, perfectly proportioned, revived at the Renaissance. Still, I differs from the I ideal. I differs from the face in the mirror. If we are honest, we must confess, I is the expression of plastic form, and the imp is excellent strangeness. Go, tangle, oh, tangle. I would also suggest we become intolerable. I am a pro. I feel then contradict Mr. J.H.O. Press, and so soften the erect on the wheel. Distort the given world. Even Aphrodite is difficult. And I, the lovely lace ruff which adorns him, but actually we do make such a sensuous impression of vitality that a man sees and feels the object, sees its universal imp, sees the one in many, the many in one, at his peril. I remember a pain that he called fine, from which ivory, bone, silk, wool, Paris. The S is his especial cathedral, conceived as walls enclosing a space, and as such must be viewed from within, or as a face defining a mass, and as such must be looked at from without. If we mind his rose and passage his child, amusingly he relates how pain is in the hands of a master. Even Leonardo had to touch my whole open window, as it has been called, with his manual dexterity and a scientific aim at feeling me not in control of his effects. He ran. Oh, heart, oh, human continent, over which stretch the skins of human terror. Sadism is intense. Myth and folklore, fairy tales and horror, we know too little, too much about our own righteous dog. I practice a disinterested appreciation, a state of passive receptiveness, as Roger Fry called it, and so find endless pleasure. We know a flue penetrates I. We know an ohm stretching from I-land through to the Renaissance. Oh, we come to be mother, other, other, as ever mother we conceive. Hand of my mom, mi mum, madre, ma mère, mama soft, sinward, strange, uncontent to remain outside. But softly we hum, feeling worser and worser, slowly learning our mum's genius is buried in the cellar. Thirst is a discipline of color, of pain, a brush, and years of rain. Thirst is author and judge of mother. It makes, then, passes through her fingers. Ink, every vulgar mother whole story. A sung story conceives a story. Please let us refashion the story. I may suggest love is a professor. 2 round arches crossing a vault. The vault suggests great height, which in turn involves the buttress a pinnacle, and so on. But that does not explain the overwhelm that meets you as you enter me, your feelings roused by no solution of engineering. How we spoke one language, subterranean masters, indulging fancies between thinks. Go to, it was never, never land, a dynasty of dumb grace we could not escape. Middle age, intact. If I describe sweetness, leaves, tendrils, flowers, animals, children, as a dreadful and vindictive plague, let that be a plea for intimacy, the miracle of some violent gesture in flesh, the pencil's blind relief. O Virgin, with the lust of angels and curs, at beloved's behest, I played thee. Masters say pain is dominated by the whip of longing. Masters say pain is the dominion of ecstasy. Masters say pain is a dominatrix, is Italian. Say love in italics, apply hot wax. Sweet boy, this is a process, can only be described as loving care. Comes lowliness, comes surprise, comes in a hood, in a van, in a cot. Act natural, frond of fern, petal of flower, lowly, the highest expression of sainthood, sweet head tumbling out, a van, a cot, my mouth. Let's all pose for St. Francis. The landscape expects to consort with ecstasy. Pull back your hood, pull back my head. The dead is no actual person, cries, Master, master, read me top to bottom. Master, master, read me under the covers. Master me over the others, bottom to top, bottoms up. Let's all drink the Virgin. Master, sweet master, peace me. Let me drink you under the table, spread like butter. Wear my thigh, there but for a white, unmarked van go I. But for the grace of a waxwork saint. Oh, oh, you found my stigmata. Mister, I am not your masterpiece. Darling, you're my very best virgin. Don't you know, if pain be real, the best virgins are the ones who play pretend. Between the Virgin and me, flesh can only be discovered by ship. I scarcely fret the waves at the foot of our fantastic fur bed. If you are erased, if the hand you see in the stone remains buried, if you dare to be no man's hotel, freedom, freedom, come to me. Within our walls, you need no discovery. Say, freedom, freedom comes, O other in me, sacred rage. Limitations are obvious. He, his he, compose he of the he from the he before him, his subjects given him by his he. One may tremble to conceive such a superman. For to part his he from he pains and pains her, he and his, I medium, weep. His eye, the whole canvas, our eye waters closing to attend. What under and under the troubling sings. Of lake, the lake of the lake we make of she. The costume into which we are born is old-fashioned. In the blue of war, over yellow roads, in cities on stage and plastic wards, bare-faced and desert-shorn, we have born masters. No memory of an unborn master. Yet must we be born one or the other? Could we be neither and wonder? Or is there ever a king in speaking, one who proclaims, I pain what I see? In his book, he who transforms the sun transforms into the sun, who we, child, must admire. O world of fiddlers in a tower of dilated suns, laboring to appease demons. O demon world, O world of imp of mousetraps and moon, memory and muchness and mouths, mouths, mouths. O birth of our artist eye. The cost is disgust, but on the other hand, disgust. Mind child, mind not our professors of shame, their fine nervous lines, their rank religious fantasy. To love yourself is no lunacy, or if lunatic it be, give us the key to the lunatics. Theirs is the only music. Over a harp, out of a lute, naked, wounded, a bird-headed corpse stoops. Perhaps we should all be lunatic, living in blue-green provinces. We might return to the burying ground, dig deep and sing our great grandmother's blues. Let us sing their bitter fruit. This is my body broken for you. But enough of sacrifice. Perhaps we are too fragile. Let us discuss the line of our new lady's shoe. I want only to think of a great lady's shoe. Accents of such individuality, of almost endless variety, the shoe, not green memory residues. A human being drifts through time like an iceberg, only it will not carry us far. So let me dispense with sentimental speculation, moody exaggeration, and attempts to reclaim our lost art. Cutting apart what is great to mourn our lost art. Perhaps I have only to appreciate the applied arts which create a psychological document, for still we paint our faces. Still we cut ourselves in private places. We eat too much or we do not eat, and all have been ill. Becoming a portrait to wed. Becoming as a mirror to wed, a slip of self reflected in the fountain. For what is the self left in the clay? The world, Venus, the end delicate, a ship, wine, wonder, the cave, glory, longing, truth, folly, ornament, piety, mystery, grace. I'm not going to answer that question. Another country are possible. We know the mind is stored with countless records of past which may, when struck, surface again in color, having been hidden so long from light. And in various countries, in the soil in every part of the world, we find an intimate desire to impart color, as inward another eye moves. We have only to ask, only to answer. This is my body breaking for you. It's just 2 more pages here. In this book, to get many of the mays had to be restructured, and the imps freed from impressionist impressions, and from painters' paintings and paints came our pain. In this book, every she is a construct, a remodel, a reconstruction, a symbol born of destruction. Likewise, each her derives from here and there, where and whether, either, rather, and other, and on the other hand becomes her hand, floating above her hand. Oh, her hands, a stone, this branch, hand in hand by her own hands, she is becoming. And yet, by my own hand and this raw biopsy, I confess a few she's carving or cutting does not satisfy. No, not when there are others we have yet to see, to hear. Oh, love, would you would add your own mark here and every other where. For alas, we have long been surgeons, remodeling vital organs, cutting away at life as if we might recover the dead, arousing with fantasies of reformities, Does the new pain differ from the old? Like wind and water, must every eye be explored? Tree and branch, lake and blood, otter, roach, cosmos. Behold, instead of mother and child, I offer up Frankenstein's portrait. Dearly begotten son of Mary, old Frank might say, this is my body broke, yo. The monumentality she achieves with her grave technique, her cutting and piecing, is apparent in the manner her mind child conceived becomes three, part sculpture, part theater, part hospital. Oh, Mr. Reed, touch me where I bleed. Put your sensitive hands in the wound. We are great reservoirs, and this portrait, a performance, an eye refrain, casting light and shade. Baby, this is our offspring. I'll stop there.
That's amazing. It's so good to hear you read this aloud in your voice, and there's just too much brilliance there to unpack in this little bit of time. I want to open it up to Q&A from the audience, but maybe while they start populating questions, you can maybe say a bit about. I think the question that most people will have is around just how you did this. Like, how did you get Faber and Faber permission from them to work with the text, and then the artwork that you put into this. If you can just kind of walk us through the process of creating something as amazing as this.
Well, I thank you, Dan. I made the book 3 times. So I worked primarily with correction fluid, and I would work really slowly as I was trying to find my way. I would work, not complete a page and then move on to the next page, because I realized that they weren't going to be discrete poems, that it was going to spill from one to another, because the language was very Latinate for one thing. So there were not a lot of concrete nouns that I could work from, which is how the imp appeared, because I sometimes needed to find like the pig in pigment or the king inside speaking in order to get footholds. So the language, I worked out the language in the first book over a period of 4 years. And then I was experimenting with visuals, and that experimentation, I made a second book that each time I made the book, I thought it was going to be my final run. Like, this thing I'm making, this is it. And then I'm like, nope, I'm going to make it again. And then I ended up making it a third time. In terms of the publication part, Faber and Faber, it was fairly straightforward. My press made the request. The book is so radically altered, and even the images are so radically altered that it's, there was a chance that we didn't actually need the permission, because it's such a fair use, because it's an entirely new thing. But we did get permission. They charged a nominal fee, and the press was willing to pay that.
Was the text already in public domain at that point?
No,
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's still being published, actually.
Wow.
I think the last printing was in the 2000s.
Oh goodness. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's the other thing I thought about while looking at it was just wondering how. I'm sorry. Hang on one second. Did you always? Okay. Let's go to the question that's here. So there's a question. Did you always work on original pages, or ever on copies of the pages?
I made myself work on original pages for the first maybe 90 pages or so. As I started to experiment more with the visual images. So in the beginning, the voice, it's very whiteout dominated with only smaller markings. And to me, the visuals got more and more aggressive and the tools got more advanced as to what the speaker was able to do. So it felt like it was embodying the speaker gaining agency over the materials as it goes. So by the end, it was scalpel and scissor, like arranging versus just using the correction fluid. And so as the visuals became more elaborate, I would work out things on copies. And I would also so the visuals being more elaborate. And then as I went even further in the text, I was cutting out words and like rearranging them and working that out in practice form.
Yeah. And as a follow-up, the questioner is asking, and when did you start cutting up the text?
I started cutting, I think I was like at like 190, 180. I had like a quarter of the book left, and I knew, and I already had some dead pages. So I that's where Frankenstein came in actually, because there were pages that I cut out and then went to mine for parts.
That's a question I had. It was because
Yeah.
I noticed that the page numbers didn't always weren't always sequential. And
Yes.
like, how did you decide that? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it was just a matter of like I worked the pages out and I didn't, it was just an editing move. Like, okay, I don't like what's going on here. So I'm gonna, and that's also how the stitching came into the book, because I was like, I don't like what's going on here. I'm gonna stitch those pages closed. I think I tried at first to glue the pages closed, and then that doesn't work because of the what needs to happen with the mechanics of the book, the way that pages need to slip past each other, but stitching worked. And that seemed totally appropriate to the fact that stitching is a female, is one of the women's arts. Now I lost track of the cutting. Yeah. So
Okay.
at like I realized that there were things I really wanted to say, and I wasn't willing to rely on the words in the order that they were appearing as I went into the final stage of the book. And so that was like the kind of final agency of I'm gonna remove more pages, and I'm gonna really lay out how I want this book to close.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have questions coming fast and furious here. So so I'm going to start with this one that is from a different person first. How did you decide to work with color/visuals versus the text imagery? How does the color and text work together?
The color, at first I was only using a little bit of red because I was working only with whiteout, and I found a buff colored whiteout that's like for manila folders. And so I was working in two tones. And then midway, like right after I finished the first book and I knew I needed to do the second book, the buff colored whiteout, we were now in 2020 March, the buff colored went completely out of production. I couldn't find it. I was like ordering it online and my orders kept disappearing. And so I realized that I could put a alcohol-based marker, archival marker, over the whiteout and approximate that parchment color, but I also suddenly had all options open to me. And I knew I wanted like kind of earthy variations, particularly I was thinking about flesh tones. However, as I used darker flesh tones, it would drown out the language and I would start to lose some. So I haven't talked about that very much because I feel like I kind of failed on that it's mostly very light color.
I think it looks beautiful.
I was thinking about earthy, like sort of, thank you.
Yeah, no, it works. It works. And so there's a question about do you have the physical possession of the final art object? And then there's also a comment that when you mentioned the stitching, that it's also kind of like Frankenstein's monster, or the stitching,
Yeah.
But to sort of tie in the question about the physical possession, um, so you did the art, and then Beth Price shot photos of it. Is that what happened?
I actually did the photos. Beth gave me some advice in terms of setting up my camera, but
wow.
I took all the photos and I processed all the
It's
photos.
amazing.
Which was really like not something I was really teaching myself how to do as I went. And like one of the hardest things was dealing with storage. I just don't know. This is the original, the artifact, the
Wow.
first book. Let's see, I can get some of that. Like, this is one of the pages that you saw that says like sadism is intense. So
Yeah.
it was, much simpler. The other two artifacts are actually in a museum right now, so I'm not in possession of them, but they're all discreet.
Yeah. Yeah. This is amazing, Jen. I mean, there's one thing to write a book like this, but there's a whole other layer of creating the actual, as the questioner said, the art object itself. This is an amazing accomplishment, and I just, that when I think about where it stands in just in the field, and thinking about Erasure, this really takes it to another level. Everything from the drawing to the use of the way in which you start with the white out, and there is that kind of palimpsest effect to that, but also the sort of stitching and the sort of connecting of words and even letters on the page. It's just brilliant. And also it just sings. Like, there's so much music. Like, to be able to take the Erasure and still find the music, the sort of like paring away the other language, and finding the Venus de Milo and whole inside of that is amazing. So thank you. I think we're at time, so I just want to thank you for this, and thank Literati.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for those words, Bam. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you also for letting me and all of the audience be here to be a part of this too, because it really is an incredibly beautiful book. And everybody here, make sure to go buy the book. I've posted the link in the chat, and you can go to Literati's website or come pick it up in store if you're in town. And then just a thank you to Jennifer and Van. This has been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. And thank you, everybody else. Have a lovely evening. And make sure to go buy Her Read, a graphic poem. All righty.
Thank you all. Bye.
Have a good night.